Sometime today, your mouth is going to fall open, your eyes will water, and for 4 seconds, you will lose control of your own face, and you still won't know why. Scientists have chased this answer for over a century, and the leading theory got thrown out only 40 years ago. Once you see what's actually happening in your skull, you'll never trust a yawn again, not even your own. And it starts 32 weeks before you're even born. In 2012, developmental psychologist Nadja Riceland at Durham University pointed an ultrasound at fetuses as young as 11 weeks old. She found them opening their jaws in a slow, wide stretch, then closing slowly again. A real yawn, not a random flutter. A true yawn has a distinct rhythm: wide opening, held pause, long, controlled close. These fetuses were doing it before they had taken a single breath of outside air, which is either beautiful or slightly unsettling, depending on how you like your prenatal facts served. Riceland's team scanned each fetus repeatedly across the pregnancy and found something else. Yawning was most frequent in the second trimester, then gradually tapered off as the fetuses got closer to full term, as if the reflex was doing more work early while the brain was still under construction. Nobody had proven a fetus could yawn on purpose before its lungs held any air at all. So here's the question. If a yawn isn't about oxygen, what is your body actually doing every time you do it? That question eventually landed on the desk of Robert Provine, a psychologist at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Provine spent years standing in malls, office hallways, and airport terminals with a clipboard and a stopwatch, quietly timing complete strangers every time they yawned, which is either dedicated science or the most patient stalking anyone has ever gotten a grant for. In 1987, Provine ran the experiment that finally tested the oxygen theory directly. He had volunteers breathe air enriched with pure oxygen, then air loaded with carbon dioxide, then plain room air, and counted every yawn in each condition. If the old theory was right, changing the gas mixture should have changed the yawning. It changed nothing. Not one measurable difference. An idea taught in biology classrooms for over 100 years turned out to be false the very first time anyone actually tested it. So if it was never about air, what has your brain been quietly trying to fix this whole time? Provine's next discovery was even stranger. Simply reading the word yawn printed on a page was enough to trigger one, and roughly 55% of the people tested. Not seeing a yawn, not hearing one, just the word, which means somewhere out there, a peer reviewer reading Provine's own grant application probably yawned at the word yawn on the very form deciding whether to fund the study of yawning. The contagion goes further than words. In 2008, researchers at Birkbeck, University of London, led by Ramiro Jolie Mascheroni, showed videos of a person yawning to 29 pet dogs. 21 of those 29 yawned back. Dogs had never been shown to catch a human's yawn before that study, so somewhere, a dog owner is currently getting yawned at by their own pet and taking it personally. 3 years later, in 2011, Matthew Campbell and Franz de Waal at Emory University's Yerkes lab pushed it further with chimpanzees. Chimps yawned back far more often when the yawning chimp on screen was one they already knew, rather than a stranger. Familiarity made the contagion stronger, suggesting yawning wasn't just physical, it was tracking something closer to empathy, or at least closeness. Here's a detail almost nobody puts in the textbook chapter. For years after Provine's oxygen results were published, medical textbooks kept printing the old theory anyway, unedited, because nobody had the funding or, frankly, the professional incentive to go back and fix a chapter about yawning. Provine himself has said yawning research was treated for decades as too trivial for serious science budgets. The single most contagious behavior in the human repertoire was also one of the most ignored, and it isn't only mammals. Birds yawn, reptiles yawn, fish yawn. In a 2021 analysis, Andrew Gallup and colleagues compared yawn duration across dozens of species and found the longer an animal's yawn lasts, the bigger its brain tends to be, and the more cortical neurons it tends to have. A mouse's yawn lasts about 1.5 seconds, and elephants can stretch past 6, which feels frankly like showing off. Provine also documented something that undercuts the tired old assumption entirely. Paratroopers, right before their first jump, often yawn repeatedly on the runway, not from exhaustion, but from a surge of adrenaline. Olympic sprinters yawn before the starting gun. People do it walking into a first date or a job interview. None of those moments involve low oxygen or boredom. They involve a nervous system about to shift gears hard. Provine also ran a version of the contagion test using only sound. He played a recording of a yawn to volunteers, with no video, no photo, nothing to look at, and people yawned back anyway, at rates close to what a visual yawn produced. The reflex didn't need eyes, it just needed information that a yawn had happened nearby. In one of his largest naturalistic studies, Provine and his students logged over 1,000 yawns in public settings and found that yawns rarely travel alone. Once one starts in a room, they arrive in short clusters, then fade out for long stretches, exactly like a contagious infection would. So dogs catch it. Chimps catch it more from friends than strangers. Bigger brains produce longer yawns. Nervous systems yawn right before the biggest moments of a person's life, not the smallest, which means a yawn might not be a symptom of running low on something. It might be your body actively preparing for what's about to happen. But that still doesn't explain what a yawn is mechanically doing inside your skull. In the 2000s, psychologist Andrew Gallup started testing a different idea entirely. Not that a yawn feeds your lungs, but that a yawn cools your brain, the same way a fan cools an overheating laptop. Gallup's theory was simple. Your brain runs best at a very specific temperature, and a yawn's deep inhale, followed by a stretch of the jaw, pulls in a rush of cooler air and blood flow that brings the brain's temperature back down a notch. But Gallup found that yawning only works to cool your brain inside a narrow temperature window. Step outside that window, and yawning stops helping you at all. Gallup tested it directly. He pressed cold packs to people's foreheads before showing them videos of other people yawning, and the contagion nearly vanished. Cool the brain down first, artificially, and the urge to copy a stranger's yawn mostly disappears. The brain, it seems, only bothers to run the fix when the fix is actually needed. Then Gallup took the question outdoors. In one field study, researchers approached strangers on the street in Tucson, Arizona, across every season of the year, and logged who yawned and when. In mild, comfortable weather, yawning rates climbed. But on the hottest days, yawning dropped off almost to nothing. At that temperature, a yawn couldn't cool anything down anymore. Pulling in 95-degree air doesn't lower your brain's temperature, it raises it. So the brain, apparently, stopped bothering. The same pattern held in winter. Below a certain outdoor temperature, yawning dropped again, because the air was already colder than the brain needed. Yawning has a thermostat, and it has both a floor and a ceiling. Gallup also found a hint of the reverse effect. People running a fever, whose brain temperature was already abnormally high, yawned less often than people with a normal temperature, even watching the exact same yawning video. If the thermostat's already maxed out, triggering another cooling cycle would do nothing, so the brain skips the signal entirely. He pushed the idea further with a study on nasal breathing. Volunteers who breathed through the nose before watching yawning videos showed a sharply reduced contagious urge to yawn, in some cases almost to zero. Nasal breathing already cools the blood flowing toward the brain, the same way the deep gasp of a yawn does. If your brain is already getting the cooling it needs, it skips the yawn entirely because there's nothing left to fix. Think about what that means. Every day, without asking your permission, some part of your brain is checking its own internal temperature, deciding whether a correction is worth the effort and either firing the reflex or holding it back. You've never once consciously decided to yawn. You've just felt the results of a decision that already got made somewhere behind your own eyes. Here's the irony worth remembering. The single most contagious, most human-feeling thing you do every day has nothing to do with feelings at all. It's your brain running routine temperature maintenance and borrowing your face to do it. There's one more piece worth knowing. Try to stop a yawn halfway through and you'll feel it, an almost unbearable pressure, like an itch you're not allowed to scratch. Provine's research suggests that's because a yawn, once triggered, is one of the few reflexes that resists being consciously overridden. You can hold your breath, you can blink less, Fully suppressing a started yawn is far harder because your brain has already decided the correction is necessary and it does not appreciate being interrupted mid-repair. Think about the last video call where one person on screen yawned, and within a minute, half the little boxes on your screen were doing it too. That wasn't boredom spreading through a meeting. That was the same reflex Provine measured with a single printed word on a page, decades before video calls existed, now running through a webcam instead of a room, brain to brain, temperature system to temperature system. It's probably already happened tonight, watching this. Hearing the word yawn this many times is exactly the stimulus Provine used in his original experiment, just stretched across several minutes instead of one printed page. If your jaw twitched even once during this video, that wasn't weakness. That was 55% of the population doing exactly what 55% of the population does. Every yawn you've had today, and every one you'll have for the rest of your life, was your brain quietly protecting itself, using the oldest trick it has, disguised the entire time as boredom. And it means the very first time your brain ever ran that exact correction. You weren't born yet. You were a fetus, alone in the dark, 11 weeks old, yawning to regulate a brain you hadn't even finished building. So, back to the question from the very top. If a yawn was never about oxygen, what is your body actually doing? Now you know the answer. It's cooling the machine you live inside, on a schedule you never agreed to, using a reflex you've been mistaking for boredom your entire life. You are cooling a machine you didn't know was overheating.